Right, well, welcome to Defen.
Hello, Ray.
Hi.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, yeah. It's Sunday evening in Belgium.
Yeah, it's Sunday evening here in the Holland too, for some reason.
Yeah. All right, so should we say who we are and what we're doing this crazy idea for?
Of course. So perhaps you want me to start? So
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Vijay, and I've been a Clojure enthusiast, and I've been programming Clojure for I think nearly 5 years on and off. Not during my day job though. And I'm also an organizer for Functional Rotterdam. I work in Rotterdam for a company called Lunatech, and I'm also a co-organizer for Dutch Clojure Day. We recently had our event in March in Amsterdam.
I was there. It was awesome.
Yeah, and I'm very interested in Clojure. I've been following with the developments in the Clojure world, and that's why I wanted to be part of this thing. And of course, thanks to you, and now I'm part of this.
Well, I think it was a really both of us want to do it, so that's really good. Because, like you say, we're both big enthusiasts. I have just recently started to help with the Belgian Clojure meetups, and we had our first meeting this last week. And like you, by day, unfortunately, for better or worse, I'm not programming Clojure yet full time. But I am at night looking at Clojure and Atomic and all kinds of interesting videos on the conferences. I just think the whole Clojure world is fascinating. It's a beautiful language to write in. It's full of innovation. The people that are doing it are super friendly. Whenever I go to the conferences, I have a great time. And it's a very interesting and innovative, exciting field, I think.
Yeah. So I think we should probably discuss why we wanted to do this podcast. Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm trying to be a strong advocate for Clojure, or at least an advocate for Clojure. I gave a talk at DevOps about why Clojure, and I would like to help, or at least do my part in making the community better and get more people to know about Clojure, and possibly, get exposed to the awesomeness of Clojure.
I mean, we absolutely share that passion. I think that's clear that we're both very keen advocates of it. And also, there's only really one or two podcasts around Clojure. There's the Cognicast, of course, from the Cognitech guys. And then there's Functional Geekery. But really, the Clojure podcast world is pretty sparse, so I think one more podcast can't do any harm. And it would be nice to see several Clojure podcasts. So hopefully we're in at the start. We can make a bit of an impact, but I think anything and every option to discuss Clojure is a good one as far as I'm concerned.
Indeed, yeah. But I should probably warn, if there is somebody listening to this one, that I'm very new to podcasts, and this is the first time.
Well, yeah, we're both starting out on this one. This is our first podcast, so yeah, let's hope that people treat us with a little bit of patience.
Yeah, so you've been warned if you're listening to this.
Yes, and the good thing is we're looking for feedback. We've got various ways to communicate. We'll put some information out about that, about how you guys can give us feedback and follow up and that kind of stuff. So maybe we should talk a little bit about what we're going to do with the show. That obviously we're going to talk about Clojure and ClojureScript, and our idea was to try and discuss various features of a language, have a 25 minutes, half an hour kind of feature discussion of some type in a podcast. So this first one, we'll just talk about Clojure and ClojureScript in general, about why we like it, what the motivations are, why we think it's an interesting technology. And then also maybe after that, we'll discuss a bit about events that are upcoming, blog posts or news in the community. Just feature that a little bit to give people some shout outs for changes that are happening.
Yeah, certainly. And of course, as you said, I mean, we'll pick some topic that we'll be discussing. I think we'll have sometimes difference of opinions that should make the show more colorful, I hope.
Not too much,
And
hopefully. I think
yeah,
hopefully we can be civilized with our differences of opinions, at least.
of course.
Yeah.
As you said, I mean, let's try to keep it like less than an hour, and then every 2 weeks we try to do this thing again, and then publish it, and then get the feedback from the people and what they think about it. As you said, we'll also try to get, because I follow a lot of Clojure news, and obviously you're also doing that as well. So we'd like to share some things in case people are not people miss something. Then we'll try to get that into the light.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. So that's the introductory and background stuff out of the way. So should we crack on with this week's topic?
Yeah.
Which is just what the hell is Clojure?
Exactly, and why should somebody pay attention to Clojure? So there are two different things that we would like to discuss today, I think. So what is Clojure? So Clojure is essentially a Lisp that runs on JVM and JavaScript platforms. And that should say a lot in terms of what Clojure is, because Lisp is one of those languages that has been there forever. And since the beginning, apart from Fortran, since the beginning, or at least beginning in terms of the reasonable languages to code in. And so the Clojure is currently running on Java VM, the JVM-based Clojure, and also on JavaScript, which is called ClojureScript. And there are some unique selling points of Clojure. First of all, because it's a Lisp, it's a dynamic language, and dynamic but compiled language compared to the other dynamic and interpreted languages. And the REPL is one of the major feature of Lisps. And
maybe we should just explain a bit about what the REPL is for, because I guess there's some people, hopefully there's some people who don't know much about Clojure or ClojureScript who are listening. So maybe we should explain a little bit about what a REPL is.
Of course. So I think REPL essentially means REPL, which is read, eval, and print loop. So there are distinct stages of a program. When you write a program, when you write it into REPL, and the forms are read, and there is a reader step, and then they are evaluated. So at the reader level, the code that you typed in, which is the text, which is converted into like an abstract syntax tree or a form, and then eval is the step where it actually evaluates whatever the form that you put into the program. And then there is a print, so because you want to know what happened to the thing, so it's going to print, and then this thing goes in a loop. So this is essentially how you build your program. You put the forms in, they are read, they are evaluated, and you get the feedback in terms of the printing, and then this is basically a loop. So in some languages, essentially these days, every language, and even Java from Java 9, they are going to have a REPL, I should say quote, unquote REPL, because there is no reader step in them. So that's essentially providing some sort of a quick interpreter level things. So that is what I think REPL is. Do you think did I miss
I think what's interesting about Lisp though is that I don't know about you. I mean, but for me, I find that if I program in like Java or Node or some other language, excuse me, I very rarely reach for the REPL by default. Whereas with Clojure and ClojureScript and these kind of languages, I'm always in the REPL. It's such a different way of programming, actually.
Yeah, that's true. It's much more organic. I mean, you're so I was actually I would like to quote from the joy of Clojure. They say there is in the other languages you have this long thought code feedback loop. So there is a lot of lag between, okay, I thought of some idea, now I'm going to write the code, and then I need to get the feedback by running the code, and then I see whether it worked or not, and then I go back to thinking again. Now, there is a lot of lag in the other languages when you're compiling the code, when you're running it, and we're waiting for the results, and then you go back. But in terms of REPL, that lag is very minimal. REPL-based languages, like especially Lisp or Clojure. So that is one of the interesting facts or interesting things that we have in Clojure that other programming languages are still trying to code up. So nowadays, I mean, other languages have REPLs, but they're fairly limited in my opinion, at least, or my experience.
Yeah, I think also what's interesting about Clojure and Lisps in general is that you tend to write sort of 1 or 2 line functions which the REPL is very good for. So, you can experiment with forms to say, okay, I want to read this data structure in, I want to do some filtering or some mapping, apply some logic to it. And you can normally achieve that within like 1 or 2 lines, 3 lines. If you're crazy, you go 5 or 6 lines in a function. But and you can kind of write that at the REPL, get some feedback, put some, like, it's almost like test-driven development, but it's like that seems a bit overkill, because it's like this REPL-driven development where you're just putting in some basic data in like a list or a vector or a map or whatever. Then you're just kind of iterating through it with your functions.
Yeah.
And then you can eventually, once you're kind of happy with that, you can like bake that off into a file somewhere and, then compose it with different functions. But you can do all of this kind of stuff through the REPL, which is, I think that's really, I don't know, it's kind of the kind of thing which is a bit surprising, because it feels so different to other languages where you have to go through this, like you said, compile, run, loop, and you have to wait all this long time until you get your feedback. Whereas in Clojure and in Lisps in general, everything tends to be very quick,
very organic,
very organic. And that's a kind of unusual aspect to it. But it's hard to. We're talking about it now. You have to kind of do it to feel it, as it were. It's a bit like driving a car or whatever. The feedback loop is there straight away. You're live. You're in it.
It's of course, yeah.
And I think, but it's interesting we talk about it as the first thing, because it is definitely the first thing you see about Clojure. You can just get started with Hello World in 2 minutes in the REPL, and you're getting productive. You're getting feedback. You don't have to. There's not a lot of syntax with it, and you can just get going pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah,
and the REPL really favors that kind of organic. I love the word organic. It's This is a key aspect, I think, for Clojure and ClojureScript.
Yeah, that's true. And also the other features that Clojure gives us, compared to the Lisp, like one of the major themes behind Clojure, it's a functional and also immutable by default language. So the data structures that we have in Clojure that gives all the persistent data structures which are immutable by default. So you don't need to reach for, is there an immutable version here? I need to use it here. And that makes the program very safe in terms of you can just pass the data around without even worrying about if somebody else is going to, pull the rug under me.
That makes it more predictable, doesn't it? It makes it more. You can think about what's actually going to happen. You can be. I think predictability is the word, isn't it? You know that if you're safe, you know that things aren't going to change underneath you. They're very stable. But that's a kind of, again, a bit of an odd thing for many programmers, I think, this concept of like immutable persistent data structures. Yeah, completely. And then there is the functional programming aspect of it. Obviously, these days, functional programming is the holy grail of getting ready to the parallel world. So the functional programming, which makes functions as the primitives, and everything is a function in Clojure, which makes the whole simplicity of writing code and structuring the program, that makes it super powerful as well. So all the higher order functions, and the way you structure the code is different, and also there are some lazy evaluation in Clojure as well, and the definition of functional programming varies between different languages. Every language has their own way of defining what is functional programming and what is not. But in my opinion, as long as there is a functions as the first class things available in the language, and also a little bit of immutability, I think that's the fundamental things that you need to have in a functional programming language. I think you're right to mention laziness, though, as well, because that's the daddy of all programming, all functional programming languages today is Haskell, isn't it?
Yeah.
And one thing they emphasize is laziness. So that, and again, but I mean, I look back at the history, and I look back at I don't know if you read the SICP or saw the videos for SICP.
Yeah.
But going back to SICP, they're always about laziness in their processing as well.
Yeah.
So, Haskell certainly didn't invent that. It was actually from Lisp.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I don't know if it was from Lisp, but that's the first I heard of it anyway.
Yeah. But there is this interesting thing about simplicity these days, because I read recently about Gerald Sussman, who wrote the SICP as well, and he was talking about nowadays programming is more about programming by poking. You don't have anything. You're not building from the smaller tools anymore. I mean, you don't need to know about what is there and underlying layer. I mean, nobody knows about the processor architecture, or nobody's worried about how this is going to be translated into the native code, because we are at least 7 or 6 levels removed from the abstraction. There are so many abstraction levels, and we are essentially writing JavaScript that runs on I don't know, V8 VM or something, and then there is another level of abstraction. And these days, the simplicity is one of the key things. You need to write simple programs, but it is very difficult to express. It's very difficult to explain, because every programming language comes up with a lot of boilerplate, and there is a lot of incidental complexity. You have to do this thing. You have to start with huge class or whatever, and then, well, not at the COBOL level. At least we have better things these days. But that is one thing that is very attractive in terms of Clojure. I think it makes the right trade-offs, in my opinion, in terms of being flexible, in terms of being powerful at the same time. And the concurrency primitive, that is something that is very interesting in Clojure as well.
Yeah, but I think you're right. Is that there's certainly patterns of usage of Clojure which are stripped down. So keep it simple, keep it doing one thing, keep it composable, keep it based around data rather than APIs. These are the kind of things which are important to make things easier to understand what's going on at the foundation.
Yeah.
And I think that's something which we really see in things like Java shops and .NET shops, is that you get a lot of code generated for you, and they claim that that's easier. And in some respects, of course, they're true. It is easier. You just push buttons, you press next, and hey, presto, you've got 1,000 lines of code. The problem is you don't understand what the hell those 1,000 lines of code do.
Yeah, I mean, you can't reason about that. Such a big system in terms of that one. That's what I think you're focusing. You're pointing out the right thing, like the composability, and data-centric programming. So it's not just about defining how to connect these pieces, but also data is the biggest thing in Clojure. You first think about the data, and then how you interact with other systems is essentially with data, and probably we should explain, how we use Clojure and what are the use cases that are most important right now.
Yeah. Because, I mean, certainly, actually, it's funny enough. I think I mentioned at the beginning that I'm doing this Belgian Clojure meetup, and we had a meetup this week to talk about ClojureScript and Clojure defaults, and so a lot of the stuff we're talking about now. And one of the questions that came up was about the use cases. What is the niche for Clojure? And I think it's interesting that some of these languages, like JavaScript, tends to have been the browser, but I don't think that's necessarily a niche. I think that's just an accident of history. But I think Scala and Python seem to be the big data languages, and yet I would say actually, although it's still early days, I would say Clojure has got a great chance to become a big data language.
Yeah, I agree, because it's as we were discussing, data is the central point in Clojure, because you are essentially, I think there is one quote that says, it's better to have 100 functions working on 5 data structures rather than the other way around. So I think Clojure's fundamental philosophy of data being the central point of the language and of the programs, I think it makes sense that it will pick up in the big data processing a lot. And there is toolkits there is frameworks like Onyx, for example, which is one of the competitors to Storm, and like batch processing and stream processing, and how do you process big data. And I would like to see more adoption in Clojure in big data world, and that because that is the right, fits like a glove or something.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting as well now is that that the Onyx team really is a team. They're actually going full time on it.
Yeah.
It's not just I think in the past a lot of these items like Cascalog and stuff like that have been, bits of sugar over Hadoop frameworks.
Exactly.
Not really rethinking stuff from a Clojure perspective.
Yes.
But if you look at Onyx really is screw this.
Yeah.
We're doing we're doing a Clojure first take of big data. Which is, I think, really exciting. I mean, I've got a lot of respect for Michael Drogalis and Lucas Bradstreet.
Yeah,
Those guys are doing really well. They're building another team around them as well, and so they've got a lot of contributors. I've chatted online to these guys as well, and they're always very polite, very respectful, very helpful. But I think they've got a great future in that framework, because I think that really is a data-first framework. And so, fingers crossed, if we can get a bit of adoption of that one, then we can start to see Clojure really as a big data use case. We can see Clojure as a good fit. I think I see it. I think you see it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Onyx guys see it.
Of course.
Fingers crossed, we can make a bit of a splash with that one.
Yeah, that's true. And also there is the standard, web development stuff, which has been pretty interesting field in Clojure-related things. So there has been, initially there was this whole discussion about, why there is no Rails in Clojure, and because as a community, I think Clojure feels more like, driving
Sinatra,
towards
probably.
Exactly, like a smaller library-driven things instead of just making a big bang frameworks. But there is, Ring and Composure. Well, Ring being a bit more low level, and Composure, and you can always pick the right pieces together and build your own framework. But there is also some nice guidelines or nice templates like Luminous, for example, and that's already good enough for building a decent web applications in Clojure. And the work that Prismatic guys did with different tooling and build their entire application in Clojure. And there was the Circle CI, and there are a lot of successes building Clojure applications in the web world. And there is this Arachne, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But actually, just going back to a point you made there earlier on about the Prismatic guys.
Yeah.
Again, that's hitting on the kind of data aspects of and the dynamic aspects of Clojure.
Yeah.
Because obviously the whole they've got this Prismatic schema thing. They've got a whole bunch of frameworks, of course, plumbing and graphs and stuff like this. But their big one the big one that's been adopted by many people in the community, I think, is this Prismatic schema.
True.
Actually, it's changed its name, hasn't it now? Isn't it called something else?
Yeah, I think it's called something else because, it was technically a very interesting company, but I think they moved on to different things now.
I think they're pivoting towards business news or something. Anyway, but the point is that whatever this schema thing is called, it's Prismatic or something else.
Yeah.
Those guys are what they're really doing is they're allowing you to say, okay, if you've got a complicated piece of data that you're passing around your program, we can validate it. Now, I don't know if you've done much with it, VJ, but I was comparing it about a month ago to JSON schema at work, because they were talking about validating things with JSON schema versus not validating things, and JSON schema is absolutely terrible compared to Prismatic. It's so clunky. Whereas Prismatic schema is so sweet. It's so easy to describe things. It's so easy just to add on and to test. Everyone was sort of falling over themselves to look at this thing, and but again, it's difficult to accept the whole language just for this one thing.
That's true. But there are multiple things that drive picking a language, right? Of course, there are different languages for different people. Obviously, it depends on how you think, and I think one of the major things that I like about Clojure is that because I programmed in Java for a long time, almost 15 years now. So it changes the way you think. So first time when I opened, I think back in 2010, I think when I was trying to do my first Clojure program, I'm so used to these classes and stuff, and because that ceremony has been part of how I start a program. There is a ritual, like dancing around fire that is needed before I need to start a program or something. So then the simplicity of the Clojure is that you use these tools and then you slowly reach out for the libraries that make more sense. and the whole static typing versus dynamic typing thing. And in Clojure, it makes more sense to describe the data and then validate the data schema rather than just giving types there. So that is one thing that I really like about schema.
Yeah, I think you're right, is that one of the things you don't need is you don't need a whole lot of ceremony up front. You don't need to design object hierarchies or all the kind of data transfer objects and all this other crud. You can just get on with programming stuff, putting data into maps or into lists or whatever is suitable, or maps inside of lists, inside of vectors, inside of whatever, the kind of usual complicated data hierarchies. It becomes a bit tricky when you want to share those structures with other people. Obviously, that's the advantage of something like schema and of types in general, is that they're really for other people.
For communicating,
For communicating, and at some point it's good to do that, but often you want to just get on with things and feel your way towards the solution. Be able to do the REPL thing where you can play with forms, play with data, play with structures, and not be constantly having to change the hierarchy or the types. It's just that the ceremony is so flipping annoying. Whereas with Clojure, you can just get on with things, change the way things are organized, change the way things are looking. You just rerun the program and off you go. And then gradually, as things stabilize and solidify, then you can start to add this kind of documentation that is actually executable around your functions.
And then, I don't want to make it like, I'm purely brainwashing people to use Clojure or something.
That's exactly what we're doing. Come on.
I mean, there are so many nice things that I think, that draws me toward Clojure and then working on it. For example, the whole asynchronous workflows of Clojure, the way you write asynchronous programs, especially with core async. And there are different ways. You can use actor-based concurrency, or you can just go very low level and then use the thread-based concurrency, or then you can switch to the channel-based concurrency, which is the CSP, communicating sequential processes stuff. And I think the Clojure channels are one of the interesting features that come up recently, and that is also one of the nice use cases. And especially, I'm not completely sure whether that is the right way to do in ClojureScript world yet, but that is also one of the things that is being adopted in ClojureScript as well, because you don't have threads, you don't have all this multi-threaded stuff that you have access to in Java, for example. So core async is really interesting thing to try, at least in Clojure. So that's what I think. Maybe we'll pick up one show, and then go do a deep dive into core async.
I think that would be really, really good. I did that myself a little while ago because I'm getting very kind of interested in the whole event stream world at the moment with Kafka and all these other big data frameworks, and you start thinking about graduating out of process channel type things into these larger distributed systems. But obviously, if you can carry on with the simple stuff, the longer the better. And core async gives you tons of mileage, and it gives you really good ways of thinking about things. But I think we'll dive into that definitely at one of the future episodes. We'll go deep into core async, because there's a hell of a lot to talk about there. I mean, I think it was. I don't know if it was really just because Node.js took the world by storm that they started thinking about core async, but I think it was partly motivated by Node.js and by the Go programming language. Both of those were basically saying, hey, you know what? We can be a lot more efficient on a single thread and serve a lot more requests with this async model than you can in your threaded world, which is the sort of traditional Clojure JVM world.
Exactly.
And this has been well proven now with Node and Nginx and Go. You can have millions and millions of channels of processes, communicating processes on a single CPU with very little overhead. So I think it's a very, very interesting world, and maybe we should, in a future show, we can talk about the various options around it, because there's obviously some positives and some negatives. So
of course,
let's do that.
Well, it's with every technology, but it's like knowing the trade-offs makes you better, so you know which tool to use at what point. But you brought up a very interesting point, like the ClojureScript world, why it is picking up, and why more and more I see people getting attracted to Clojure because of the ClojureScript. So that is also something that brings more people into the Clojure world because of the way the developer tooling is set up in Clojure, for example.
Yes,
I think we were talking about Figwheel some time ago. So
yeah, I think Bruce Harmon there has done an awesome, incredible job. Props out to that guy because he's doing great work. We've seen a few of his presentations now at the various conferences.
Yeah.
And obviously, David Nolan has been a total star in terms of getting the JavaScript community fired up for ClojureScript, advocating out there on all these various conferences. And those guys are doing a great job. And Mike Fikes, of course, in the native world.
Exactly. He's bringing the ClojureScript to Mac and even iPhone. And it was super awesome because last time at a meetup, I was just showing Clojure on an iPad now, thanks to him.
Actually, so was I.
Yeah.
I demonstrated that exactly this week because I've got an iPad Pro, so I was showing like how to edit Clojure using this Textastic, which is an iPad app that has Clojure syntax highlighting.
Sweet.
And then you can just copy and paste side by side into the Replete REPL that Mike has done. And it's really fantastic. Of course, it's not really going to substitute for your desktop development environment yet, but it's a great proof of concept. It's a great proof that if you want to, write stuff at a REPL on an aeroplane, it's totally possible now.
Of course, and if you see the way ClojureScript has adopted the whole React framework from JavaScript, which has become like a more de facto standard for ClojureScript right these days. And there are tons of wrappers for React or the libraries that use React, especially being Ohm, and then Ohm has been rethought again. And that is the trailblazer or the frontier, or I don't know what you call that, the first ever pioneer, probably that's the right word. So pioneering the React wave. And then there was this reagent, and then a lot of other libraries which are using React, and then bring Clojure power, and then bring it into the React world. I think that is one of the major attractions for ClojureScript right now in terms of the libraries.
Yeah, I think actually as well, what's really interesting is the impact that Om and OmNext and really David Nolan, I think, has had on the ClojureScript world. Because obviously there's him, and then there's the Elm guys as well. But they're really making the React guys and the Facebook guys and the whole kind of JavaScript community think again about what it means to do big apps in JavaScript. And what's interesting to me, I don't know if you have followed the kind of, obviously Facebook have got this immutable JS now as well, so they've got their own version of persistent immutable collections. That's based around the stuff that David Nolan did. But they've also got this language called Flow. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I think I read about it, I think 2-3 weeks ago or something. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of weird to me because it's kind of like, well, actually, you're no longer just using JavaScript anymore. They're trying to do this typing thing. But at some point, I think the whole React ecosystem is kind of really kind of coming so close to ClojureScript that you might as well just take ClojureScript because it's got everything already. It's kind of standard. Like you said earlier, it's the default for many things. Many things in the ClojureScript world are defaulted to be good. Whereas if you're adopting the whole React Redux Flow thing from Facebook, well, that's great. But as a team, it's a dangerous place to be because that team can start to bring in all kinds of weird and wonderful JavaScript stuff. And, you're having to enforce good discipline on the team at all times. Whereas if you go with ClojureScript, then the kind of discipline comes out of the language.
Yeah, that's true.
You can just get on with stuff.
Yeah. And also the other types of frameworks like Hoplon, and there are some, of course.
I'm a big fan of Hoplon.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't play with it though. I was more looking into the React-related things most of the time.
No, well, I mean, I've done a few things, even committed a few examples to the Hoplon repository,
Nice.
and those guys are doing incredibly good work over there as well. They're
Yeah.
taking a very different approach to the React guys. They're going more multi-atom, so they're going spreadsheet style. So you can have this concept of a formula cell where you a value cell where you put information and data. Then you have these formula cells where you essentially watch the data cells and you put functions in the formula cells. So you can have this properly reactive programming model, and you get these dependency networks, and it feels like you can really build Excel style spreadsheets or complex workflows on much smaller pieces. And in a different way than with React.
Yeah, I think that's the availability of different kinds of libraries and different kinds of thinking. That's pretty awesome. And also, as you were pointing out, in Hoplon, there's like Lisp everywhere, so everything is just basically Lisp driven. And HTML.
Yeah, they're really thinking about the designers as well. So you can actually write, you can just use HTML. Actually, if you're a programmer, you can write HTML as Lisp.
Yeah.
But Hoplon also will just consume HTML. So if you're a designer and you're just doing HTML and CSS, then you can still use those tools. But if you're a programmer and you want to extend the DOM, then it's more kind of, I don't want to say it's Angular styley because it's not really like Angular, because I'm not a big fan of Angular, but in the sense that you can extend the DOM with Lisp, then it is a bit like Angular. But I find that a kind of odd kind of comparison. But certainly the concept of being able to just put functions and just add components in where you want them and extend the DOM as you wish, then this Hoplon HLisp, it's called, is really incredible.
Nice. And of course, I mean, we need to talk about the latest developments as well. Like as I was mentioning to you the other day, there is this Electron, which is you can use it to build desktop applications, and that is the core of Atom, and that is in JavaScript.
Yes.
And nowadays you can build even a desktop application in ClojureScript, because there is, so that you can use Clojure as we were pointing out the use cases, for big data and building the standard web applications. And if you want to write a nice concurrent program, you can use that for that too. And then there is web applications, obviously using completely Clojure scripts, right? Sparse or single page applications, very rich internet applications, and using OM and reagent. And also now you can build complete pure desktop applications, because the more and more I see every application is now written in the web applications especially, and they have a native application which is essentially a wrapper around the web application, so you can reuse the same code. For example,
it's Node.js basically, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly. So Slack and HipChat and all these sorts of applications, nowadays there is a lot of applications built using the Electron shell, and the code that drives it is essentially JavaScript. That means you can use ClojureScript to build desktop applications now, which is pretty interesting.
Actually, as an aside, you just reminded me there of a blog post I saw a few months ago, actually, which was that, you remember the AWS Lambdas?
Yeah.
These are a thing of beauty, I've got to say. And we've been using them at work for actually since they were in beta even, because they're such an exciting concept. But what's interesting about them is that their first instance was running Node, and now of course you can actually, like you say with Electron, you can also write your ClojureScript and deploy your ClojureScript to the Lambda as well. And that's actually a nicer use case than for the Java VM, because your Lambdas are smaller and faster and lighter weight.
Yeah. So I think there are lots of use cases now. I think we have plenty of libraries to talk about in the upcoming shows.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be good. I think there's a lot of great stuff. But what we should do is we should just quickly talk about the community, because I think that's the one thing that sells Clojure to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think that, I don't know about you, but I've been involved in other programming languages community for a long time.
Okay.
And I've never really had a more friendly, welcoming community than I've experienced with ClojureScript and Clojure.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I've been not idling essentially. I mean, I've been on IRC channel since the beginning, well, most of the time. And then I see the way people interact with each other and helping each other, and there were a lot of questions that I had in the beginning, and the way they talk to each other, and even the Clojure community here in the Netherlands, that when I interact with them, it's a completely different experience. I mean, I think you can see that in the way people think, in the way they interact with each other, and the mailing list, of course. And there is still, I don't know. I like the languages which have this, BDFL sort of thing, like benevolent dictator for life. So.
So you're a fan of Perl, are you?
Well, I don't consider Larry Wall to be a dictator type of person, though. At least it's not a comedy. And I've been on Perl monks. That was a long time ago. And
right.
Perl is another interesting language, and it turned out to be something pretty new these days with Perl 6. But anyway, it's not about Perl, though. So, I mean, from the community point of view, I think it's really great the way the conferences are organized, and of course all the work Alex Miller is doing. With the Euro Clojure and all the Clojure conferences there, it's just fantastic. I mean, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to also. I mean, you can have it with other languages as well, but you see these conferences where people are standing up, and the variety of talks and the amount of innovation that's going on in Clojure is just incredible. I think people are looking at all kinds of things to do with typing systems, to do with data structures, to do with live coding. Like you said, it's a very complete end-to-end solution. And you've got, what I find also interesting is you've got an interesting mix of kind of practical and academic research going on at the same time. It's definitely Clojure and ClojureScript, to me, are very, very practical languages, which is somewhat unusual for a Lisp, actually, I think. Which have tended to be quite academic, quite locked in their AI world in the past. And I think what's interesting about Clojure is bringing that kind of stuff out of the AI wardrobe and applying it to more, I wouldn't say banal, but more straightforward use cases.
Yeah, they're like the 90% of the programming.
Yeah. And actually, I remember seeing a talk a while ago, or years ago actually, at a conference in London, where one of the guys from Nokia was talking about web programming and how you fill out a form, you put some JSON in a form, you do some get it off the net, store it in a database, and then get it back out again. And you look at the kind of frameworks that you've got in Clojure, in Java to do this kind of stuff, and it's like thousands of lines for every stage of that particular pipeline, and you can do it in 100 lines in Clojure. And then suddenly it's fantastic. These kind of things are actually achievable by standard people. So Lisp is no longer this kind of elite, rarefied thing. It's actually accessible, and I think that's what I find anyway. Because I'm not some kind of towering genius.
I mean, it's the same.
You shouldn't say, of course, to that. You should say, yeah, Ray, you are really, but
What I meant was, of course, it's the same situation for me. You didn't let me finish that.
Oh, sorry.
But yeah, I mean, that's the nicest thing with Clojure, that I find it fascinating that the simplicity is not just for the demo programs. It's the simplicity scales up. If I say it right, I don't know how to say that. It can still be simple when you build large programs, which is very, very interesting in Clojure for me.
Actually, you make a good point there, because I think what's interesting is that a lot of people with various languages, they show you these kind of demo programs.
Exactly.
And it doesn't go beyond that. Actually, what you learn in the demo is not applicable more broadly. So, you kind of like, oh, right, I know how to do this in a demo, but what generally did I learn? And so actually what's interesting about Clojure as a concept, and Lisp in general, of course, is that, everything that you learn in your demos, you just take it further, because it's essentially all the same. The syntax is very similar, very consistent. And then really you're free to riff on libraries and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so I don't know, I think that was a bit of a whirlwind introduction. Do you think that was probably enough?
Yeah, I think so. I think we at least expressed our passion towards Clojure and why we think Clojure is important for us. I hopefully, from the next shows, I think we should deep dive into different libraries, or perhaps, what is happening around Clojure. So maybe we should explain some practical things, like where are we going to put this up?
Right. Okay. So yeah, there's a few moving parts, isn't there? But so we're going to have a website.
Yeah.
We've got defen.audio, which has well that will have a link to the podcast, of course, with the show notes and stuff like that. I mean, I say show notes. We kind of, I don't know if we'll have any for this one.
Yeah, probably I will just add some summary, what we discussed. But most of the time, I think we'll try to add if we discussed a specific blog post or if we discussed specific library, we'll just post the stuff there. And,
Yes,
and we can't actually read out the code during the show. So if we
oh, it's a shame.
so it will be something
Open
like parenthesis def and hello world. That would be stupid. But otherwise, I think we'd like to post the show notes with links and interesting stuff that we discussed about. That I think that will be the central point of people getting in touch with us. And
Yeah. Also, I think we've created a Twitter account as well. So Defen Podcast, we can have Twitter, and I think it would be great to have some conversations there.
Yeah.
That's probably going to be the easiest place for people to give feedback. Actually, maybe it's on Reddit also. We'll see. I must
Yeah,
admit,
of course.
I'm not
I'll
a great.
post this to the Clojure Reddit, and
Yeah.
then see what people think. If any of you guys are listening, this is the first time we're doing this, or at least I'm doing this, and I think the same. I can speak for Ray as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think we'd love to get more feedback on this. I understand this episode is more kind of a very bird's eye view level stuff, but we hope to get into, as we explained in the show format, we'll make it much more interesting in the coming episodes, deep diving into types. And we'd also probably join Slack, the Clojure and Slack. If you don't know it, there is a huge community, more than I think even 4,000 members now on Slack right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's getting beyond the Slack limits, and I think that's what people are getting frightened about that now.
Exactly.
So there is a 10,000 limit or something on Slack.
Yeah, I think so. Well, at least for the messages, we cannot go back to the history, and of course there is IRC always, and we'll be there on Slack and slacking.
Slack's turning out to be a bit of a nightmare, I think. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, but it's actually annoying that it's limited in terms of its messages and its sort of funding of open source and these kind of things. So maybe we'll see how that works out.
Yeah.
But you're right. We should post something on there at least.
Yeah.
Obviously, as well, this thing's going to be on iTunes. We're going to post it on SoundCloud to do the hosting, and then we'll link that through to iTunes so that people can get it on their favorite podcasters or podcatchers, whatever they're called. Yeah. But just to shout out to guys, it would be really good if you do get it through iTunes and you can go to the store and rate us, because my understanding from other podcasts is that if you rate the podcast in iTunes, then that puts us up the lists. So that gets the word out a bit more strongly.
Yeah, of course. And we'd love to hear the feedback. I mean, of course, we sometimes have our own personal opinions, so that will slip through the things. And we'd like to know what you guys think and let us know your feedback. And as Ray was saying, it would be nice if you can give us some rating and give the feedback in the upcoming shows and follow us on Twitter at Defen Podcast. I think that would be a awesome opportunity for us to learn from you guys as well.
Yeah, that would be really good. Okay, so I guess we should just wrap it up finally with what we're going to talk about next.
Yeah.
And we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into something that I think is maybe it's a bit odd, but we started the program with the REPL, and that was one of the first things that I think both of us were really strong in saying, that the REPL is a key to Clojure, and the foundation of the REPL is this the reader. So I think next fortnight, next whenever, we're going to have a discussion about the Clojure reader and what it is, what it does, what the various implementation options are, how it's used around the various libraries, and maybe there's also some general controversies around user-defined reader macros and how they've, what the history of those are, and so a general more of a deep dive into one particular feature of Clojure.
Yeah. So next week it will be the reader. So that will be the first, probably the first deep dive episode of our podcast, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for listening, everybody. thank you, VJ. I think it's been a good episode. We're in like 45 minutes in now, so I think we're given enough content for this one.
Yeah.
Like you say, we'll try and keep it under an hour. So next time around, in a few weeks, we'll have a discussion about the reader, maybe some follow-up to this first episode, see what people are saying out on the various social networks.
Yeah.
And that's it. Any last words from you, VJ?
That's it. I'm actually looking forward to doing this every 2 weeks. Hopefully, we'll keep this up. And the next time we'll discuss about reader, and maybe I'll have some reading to do. And
I see what you did there.
So that'll be fun. So hopefully, if people who are listening to this, we'll see you next time.
All right. Cheers.